I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's great to be back here. You know, it's funny, you miss a month and it's like 2 months. So it's been a long time since I've seen you all, so I'm glad to be back. And looking forward to a great conversation. I know, I think it's a great concept Charlotte came up with, is talking about strategic influence within an organization so that you're visible, whether it's for promotions or maybe when there are cutbacks or layoffs, maybe if you're visible and well connected in the company, you might not be part of that. And so that also leads into networking and all this kind of other stuff and finding advocates and things like that. So we'll get into all that stuff. But before we do, let's go around and get an introduction from our great coaches. And why don't we start with Charlotte?
Okay. I'm Charlotte Taylor. I'm a career coach and resume writer based in Central Florida. I'm about halfway between Orlando and Tampa, so I'll be close to Melanie when she moves to Tampa here. And, really, I have been working with mid-career mid-level managers who are trying to manage up and down, and how can they position themselves for promotion. So I was happy to see this topic because I think it's one that a lot of people are facing right now.
Great. Well, thank you, Charlotte. Glad you're here. Looking forward to some great stuff from you. And Melanie, how about you?
Yeah, for those that don't know who I am, my name is Melanie Mitchell Wexler. I am an executive career coach as well as a LinkedIn strategist, and I typically work with individuals that are looking to make a pivot in their careers, whether they have to or because they want to. And they come from all different industries. Right now, I've actually got multiple clients in interview stages. We've got one just landed a job at Google. I have another one starting interviews with Google, Bristol Myers Squibb, as well as Georgia Pacific and the American Red Cross. So that gives you an idea. I work across the board with all different types of professionals. And I think it's important to look at your job search from a very strategic standpoint, but also looking at your career strategically as well. So looking forward to diving more into it. And of course, if you have questions, please let us know and you can drop them in the chat.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. Look forward to talking with you tonight. And that leaves us with, last but certainly not least, Alan Kirshner. You want to introduce yourself, Alan?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Kirshner. As Ken was saying, I'm a career coach based out of New Jersey. Had the good fortune of having Ken be a speaker at a job seeker support group that I'm on the executive board of last Friday, and he did an awesome job as expected. So that was great to see one of my coaching friends live in the flesh, and it's been quite a while since we saw each other. And wanted to mention also that 3 of the clients that I've been working with have landed in the last week. One I just had noticed today. So I wanted to keep people encouraged and let them know, as much as it's a challenging market out there, people are landing. And I think we'll probably get into it a lot today, but networking, I think, was a component with each one of the ones that landed. So I think that's something that we emphasize a lot, and it certainly pays dividends.
Great. Thank you, Alan. And good to have you here. And thanks for being there for the talk last week, too. It's great. It's fun group there. And I'm Ken Schur. I'm a career coach. I'm also an executive coach. And I've been doing some keynote speaking and authoring, too. I wrote a book called What's Trust Got to Do with It? And I'm glad to be back to talk with you all. And let's kick it off then. And Charlotte, I'm going to come back to you. When you talked about making sure you're visible within the organization, influencing the organization so that you're in a good position for promotion or whatever. How do you do that? What is it you would suggest to people to, who still are working? How do they establish themselves so that maybe they?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to talk about the difference between, this cross-functional leadership isn't just a watered down version of traditional management. It's discipline in its own right, and it requires specific skills. Can't speak, specific skills. Say that 3 times fast. That hinges on building visibility within the company, cultivating trust, and mastering that ethical influence. So what it looks like is that, leaders, rather than impose their own vision, usually are very Socratic leaders. And by that, I mean that they like to lead by asking questions like, how could we develop the customer experience here, and get buy-in from other people? That way they're not giving orders, they're making people feel like the idea was theirs all along. It's really not manipulation, it's leadership. And then when they're presenting a business need to the bigger team, it's critical to say why something is needed, what impact it has, framing that need in terms of what the stakeholder actually values. And, speaking like a environmental health and safety manager, they would want to talk about, how many days they've gone without injuries. But the CFO cares about margin. He cares about safety, of course, but by having no incidents, that actually is a savings. So you want to speak to each person, thinking of what their function is within the industry. And then I think mapping the power grid, not just the organizational chart. Sometimes the real influencers in an organization are not necessarily those that have the big fancy titles. In many companies, the person who has been there for like 20 years and knows all the inner workings of that company will have far more sway than, say, a newly promoted director, or even an outside person that's brought in that has to learn the inner workings of the company. And if you've been there for a while, you probably already know who these people are. So start engaging with them. And then the last point I would say is credibility. Influence in a matrix environment starts with delivering high quality work, communicating clearly, consistently demonstrating your technical expertise, while also building that deep knowledge of your company's structure and their decision-making processes and those little cultural nuances. So, you want to create that collaboration, and also, start acting like a leader, even if you're not in a leadership role. Volunteer for projects and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great, Charlotte. It's really, it's taking it beyond just going in, putting your head down and doing your job. It's looking around, it's looking at the big picture and trying to contribute in a way that really makes you, bigger than just your role. So Melanie, if you're in a job, certainly that's something you need to be doing. How do you exert that kind of influence or establish your subject matter expertise when you're looking for a job?
So that's a really good question, because obviously there's always two sides to this coin. So I think you've got a couple of different options that you can explore. One is to stay on top of what's happening in your industry. So look for opportunities for additional trainings, and not just trainings for the sake of trainings. There's a lot of resources out there, so it can be overwhelming, but really find something that showcases that you're continuously learning, that you're continuously educating yourself. The other is continuous activity with professionals that are doing the job that you're seeking. That's the other thing. And that can happen by being on LinkedIn, by engaging in content, because that's the other thing, is that when people come to your profile, they can see the types of the comments that you're making. Who are you engaging with? You should be finding the people that you would ultimately, the types of people that are doing the job, or the types of people that you would report to in a company. And so start having, conversations. And I don't mean just by connecting and, and then if you don't know if they're going to connect back or anything like that. Go to see if they're creating any content. If they're not creating content, go to the company page. Showcase your knowledge. Your engagement on LinkedIn actually serves you kind of twofold purposes. So one, it can drive traffic to your LinkedIn profile, which we want more eyes on your profile, because the more eyes, the greater visibility you have, and then you have the greater opportunity to be found. The other reason is you have an opportunity to showcase your knowledge. And so the comments should be strategic. The comments should be something that's very, you should think of that as like, I'm sitting at a table with somebody in a business meeting. How would I respond to that question? How would I respond to that? That post poses a question. How am I going to respond to that? If I was in a business setting, how would, put that hat on, not as the job seeker, not as, in that moment, but literally, like, if this was a business meeting and that question was asked, how would I respond? That should be your engagement. And I know it sounds boring, and I know it sounds like, well, who wants that? But really, when people are looking at your LinkedIn profile, and yes, people are looking at your LinkedIn profile. I know very much hiring managers go and look at LinkedIn profiles. They are going to look for that, and that sits at closer to the top. So it's an opportunity that most job seekers are not taking advantage of.
Yeah, that's really, it's critical. It's really marketing when you think, right? That's what we're doing. You need to market yourself. And, when you think of really strong brands and slogans, even, like, I don't know, it's the real thing. I guess that's an old one now, but that's, we all know it's Coca-Cola or Breakfast of Champions, which has been around since the 1930s. That didn't happen overnight. It happened over by that message being driven over and over again. So by doing what Melanie talked about, being engaged and active on LinkedIn, that's your marketing. You're getting your name out there over and over again, to the point where a recruiter or hiring manager would hopefully say, boy, I keep seeing these comments, these great comments from this person. Let me check out their profile. And that's when you need to have a strong profile. But it's really a matter of getting your name out there with good, solid content. And that could just be comments on other people's posts, as long as there's substance to it. That will really help get your name out there and get you to be someone that people come to your profile to look at. I will tell you, when I post and I don't post, there's a big difference. I've been posting a lot over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I see the number of profile views going up. I see, just a lot more activity on LinkedIn with me because of that. So, Alan, one of the things that I hear all the time, I'm sure you guys hear this too from clients about networking, is, it's so awkward. They know why I'm calling. They know I'm out of work and I'm looking for a job. I'm just really uncomfortable doing that. What do you say to people with that, and what advice do you have them in terms of how they approach networking?
Yeah, I get that. It definitely can be something that might feel uncomfortable. So I say start out with the people that you know, who know you pretty well. That could be neighbors, it could be former colleagues, it could be people you went to school with. So I like to start out and build momentum by doing that first. And then you don't want to do the ask of, can you help me find a job? That's a big turnoff. So you want to find commonality. You want to create conversations with people too. Networking is really sharing information. It's really relationship building. People sometimes don't like that terminology, networking. I was working with a client who didn't like that at all. So I said, it's really relationship building. And relationship building is creating a dialogue with somebody, asking them how you can help them, what you can do for them, finding out what they do, and developing a relationship. So I think it's important to start out building momentum initially, but then looking at it more as a relationship, as opposed to, what can somebody do for me? And I think having that commonality is really very important too. Like if you start out and go to alumni, for example, you have a connection, you went to the same school, you might have walked the same streets, stayed in the same dorm and things like that. So I think where you have commonality and a connection, I think that makes it easier too, it doesn't feel as awkward. So I would say start out with what you know, who knows you, and build from there, and try to get introductions as well too. When you try to do cold networking with somebody that doesn't know you, that's a lot less likely that they're going to, want to have a conversation with you. If you have somebody that you know, and somebody asks you to do an introduction and you do that, that immediately gives you credibility. They're more likely to be willing to help you out because it's somebody that you have in common. So I think getting referrals for networking purposes, as well as, when you're in the job search for applying for positions as well too. But I think it's important, that commonality aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Alan. Starting with people you get comfortable with it, they introduce you to other people. And to your point, when you can find that commonality, and college alum is a great example you gave, it does make it a little bit easier. And like anything, the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with it, and the better you'll get with it. So, you know what? You might have some awkward conversations. You might, quote unquote, fail sometimes. I'm not sure what failing in networking would look like, but it doesn't matter. You're growing, you're moving on, and you're just making connections along the way. So that's good advice, Alan. Thank you. Melanie, we often talk about being strategic in a job search. What does that mean, to be strategic, or can you give an example of that?
Well, for me, it's about having a plan first and foremost. So it's being very clear. When I'm working with my clients, one of the things that I ask them is, I want to know, like, what is that dream job? And I know for a lot of people that are actively seeking or been in the market for a while, that can seem kind of like, hey, Melanie, I just want a job. Like, I don't even care if it's my dream job. And I think it's important that when you're very specific about the types of opportunities you're looking for, that it helps you stay, it helps you keep a focus on the direction that you should be going in. So what are the requirements that you need? What are the things that you're looking for? And when you read through a job description, I just went through a couple of examples with a client yesterday where she was kind of getting watered down with a lot of different job descriptions that can kind of mean some different things. And so giving her some hints, helpful tips on like what actually translates in a job description, based on certain words that they use, things of that nature. And so, but being very clear. And so when you have a very clear path, it's not about applying for hundreds upon hundreds of jobs. That's not the goal. The goal is actually, sometimes I'll have my clients be like, I only applied for 3 jobs. And I was like, that's okay, because it's what we're doing after the fact. It's how we're going to leverage our network. Using our second degree connections, using our own first degree connections. Who is already in my network that can help make an introduction? Who is it? How am I connected to that person? Most people will connect with you that are doing the same job that you're doing. And those are conversations that we can get started. It's not going to happen, it's not going to happen overnight, but it is going to, you can lay the groundwork. And that's the thing, is like, when we give this advice, it's not pie in the sky kind of, I want to be very clear on that. It's not like pie in the sky kind of advice. It's about pieces. It's pieces of the puzzle that make the picture. And so it's not something that, just because you reached out to one person and you have a connection. No, it may take 10 people. And don't expect that person will, necessarily follow up just because you connected and sent a message to them. Some people have the intention of doing that. And I think I've used this example a couple of times, maybe, I'm not sure in this call or not, but I had a client of mine check out my profile, and the same goes for job seekers here. We're already connected, by the way. He could send me a message. Checked out my profile. I sent him a message. I said, hey, thanks, Dave, for checking out my profile. What's happening? Haven't heard from you in a while. I hope everything's well. And he was like, oh, I was checking out your profile because I was wanting to see if, I meant to ask you if you would be interested in working on my resume. Yeah, yeah, Dave, I'm interested in working on your resume. But he never messaged me. He never said anything. He never did it. Like, I'm the one who had to reach out to him. I'm the one who initiated the conversation. And so, you know, we're busy. We hit that accept button. We go and do 12 other things. And then we're like, oh yeah, I need to go back to that one person. And, you know, time happens. So you have to take control of your job search. And that's the other thing about being strategic. You have to ask yourself, what are the activities I'm doing today? Where's my focus? Who am I reaching out to? How, you know, and what am I saying? Every person that you reach out to, you should ask yourself this question. Why am I reaching out to this person? What's the purpose for that? And if there's not, then we go to the next person, because we want to be very mindful of our time and mindful of the conversations we're having.
Very good. That's excellent direction. And it's really making your job search more thoughtful and more intentional. And I think that's great. Just looking at the chat, first of all, I just want to acknowledge some folks. Of course, Meryl, who is just awesome in keeping the conversation going and getting people to come. And thanks for that. Just do it. You're right, Nike. That was a great example. It's great to see Gregory and Jay, some of our regulars. Sajid here as well. And then also some new folks. So if you're new, or regardless, let us know where you're from. It's pretty cool. I know John, I think, is from Chicago. We got someone from Union County, New Jersey. It's pretty cool to see people from everywhere. So let us know where you're at, and also introduce yourself if you want to others on the call. This is how you start networking. You people on the call, that's a common thing. You're both on this call. You could talk to each other. You could either talk about how great you think we are, or you could trash us, whatever you want to do. It's you can do that, but connect with each other, and you never know where those connections will lead. Let me come back to Charla then. Charla, we also talk a lot about branding. How do you establish your brand? Maybe even how do you find what your brand is, establish it, and then how do you communicate it to the world?
Yeah. Can I add one thing to what Melanie was saying?
No,
before I forget it, and then I'll answer your question.
You say whatever you want.
One of the things that I did recently was to download all my contacts from LinkedIn, and we were encouraged to map out those clusters where we were very active. And what I found out is I tend to talk to other career coaches and resume writers when I should be out talking with potential clients. And it really was kind of an eye-opening situation that, those friends, although they're your support group and we do support one another, that's not who I should be talking to. So if you're talking to the same people in your network all the time, really try to reimagine and strategically plan, like Melanie was saying, who do you need to be talking to open doors, in whatever company. And we're all happy to, if you notice that we're connected with someone and you want an introduction, I know I'm more than happy. And I'm sure everybody, Ken and Melanie and Alan would be, happy to introduce you as well, so that you can get your foot in the door and talk with someone who works inside a company that you're interested in. As far as the branding.
Wait, Charlotte, could I ask you something? I'm sorry, before you get
Sure.
to that. So how did you do that clustering, that you knew who you were contacting?
Oh, I had some AI prompts that I just, kind of separated it out and tagged everybody according to whether they were a career coach or whether they were, someone I knew from my son's Boy Scout troop years ago, or, how did I know that person? So just tag each one of them, and then you'll be able to see. And I also have a couple of AI prompts I'll send to you, Ken, that really kind of help with that as well. And I think, was it Kevin Turner that posted about it? I'll have to find it.
I know Mac posted about it. I just lost his last name out of my head. But one of the things that you can do is you can actually download your comments for me, that would be a big download because that's where I spend the most of my time. But you can actually download your comments. You can download you can download your comments off of your data on LinkedIn, and that's actually where you can start to use those prompts. So you can kind of start to see like, who are you talking to? But even like without using AI, and I fully agree with the direction Charlotte, like, we're getting granular here because that's this market. This market's requiring us to think in very specific, like, it's not enough. I mean, knock on wood, I know all of us, we've had success with clients applying for jobs. I mean, we have had success. So we're seeing success happen in many different ways. And I think that's an important aspect of this job market in particular.
Yeah. Do you think it's, with that, is it harder, Melanie, to change careers
I
because
think the way I look at it, I say to all of my clients that come to me, a pivot is always hard, no matter what. So you could be pivoting to a totally different career. Yes, a 360 pivot is going to be harder than a 180, but a 180 is still hard to do. I think in this particular market, if you're doing a full-on pivot, yes, you're going to have to expect it's going to take you longer than it probably would have in any other market. But if it's a pivot, say to just a same type of industry, same type of position, but a different company. So I always say there's all these different types of pivots. But one of the things that what I'm telling people, and of course love to hear from you guys as well, is you literally are competing against almost your twin in this environment. And by that, I mean, if I invite 3 people to the interview, all 3 of you have the same level of experience. On paper, all 3 of you are equal. And so that's one of the things that you have to remember when you're interviewing and you're applying for jobs. It's not enough to just be qualified. You have to be able to explain how your qualifications can help them make an impact, which goes to what you and Charla were speaking about at the beginning. They need
that's
to
so
know
much branding. Your branding has to be story driven. Everybody has quantifiable achievements. Everybody has similar educational background that's required for that position. And when you are starting conversations and building relationships, you want to lead with story, not statistics. You want to talk about, how you were able to turn a frustrated customer into a very satisfied customer. That story will land harder than a slide deck that's full of churn metrics. So you've got to be more human in your outreach. And in that kind of a paradox, that in this age of AI, what's really making you strategically stand out is who you are as a person. And I think that's a really cool outcome from, the other side of the story, that AI generated resumes make everyone sound alike. It is your opportunity to have that through line. Maybe you have done several different things and pivoted to different industries or different roles, but it's that common thread that runs through your strengths, your ability to communicate with people, whatever it is, that's your secret sauce. That's the story that you want to tell. And that's the person that you want to be known for. So I think it's really cool that although we can snap our fingers and, generate an AI content, that's not what you want to do. You want to be uniquely you. You have certain qualities that no one else has. Tell us how you use those to make a difference.
Yeah, very good. So can you give us an example or two of what a brand, maybe one of your clients, or just generally speaking, what would that sound like then?
Yeah.
Is there a statement, or is it
I really like to use a combination of your industry role or your job title plus a value proposition statement. So, you might say, let me think if I'm having troubles thinking of one off the top of my head, but the formula for that, really, if you want to just break it down into a how-to, would be to lead with some industry keywords and then use an ing verb like helping or achieving or something that shows the transformation that you bring, and the outcome, that the benefit to the employer. In other words, it's not all about you. It's all about how you in this position can deliver outcomes. So what is that unique value that you bring that no one else does? Those are the kinds of things that make you, your brand stand out. And I think I did a post on branding that compared branding to, a chef's secret sauce. You have, people seem to think, well, I'm just what I do. I do the same thing every day. But that's not what you want to share. You want to share how you made a difference. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, and I think, again, I'm sure all of us as coaches have seen this when our clients come to us and say, "Oh, I just did my job. I just went in and did my job every day." But through the questions we ask and the conversations we have with our clients, I think we all agree. We find out that people have done some very remarkable things and things that make them stand out and separate them. And we all have a personal brand, but sometimes you need a little help to find out what that is. So Alan, coming back to you then, how do you portray your personal brand? Where does it come out, and how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it should be in any of your marketing documents, your LinkedIn profile, your resume. If you have a website, it would be there as well too. So you want to have consistency in your message. And I think that's also the same when it comes to being a job seeker. You want to have those things in sync on your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter as well too. So I think it's, looking at it as a whole, it needs to be in all those places. And how does it come out when you're doing networking? If you're at a support group or you're just at a trade association meeting or something, it's what you say when somebody says, "Hi, glad to meet you. So tell me a little bit about yourself." It's something, you want to practice, you want to hone in on, you want to make it memorable for one thing. You don't want to make it too long. We have in the job seeker support group that I'm involved in, we do 10-second pitches. So people like to say that, people just kind of zone out if you go into, 30 seconds or a minute or something. So you want to be memorable. You want to say something that's unique about having your personality shine through. That's part of the issue with just using AI for writing your resume and stuff. You want to have your personality, what makes you special, kind of come out and shine. And I think that's part of your branding statement as well too. And it's, it's basically, what people will say about you when you're not in the room. So you want to make it something concise. You want to make it something memorable. You want to have people interested when they hear something about that, or when they read something about that they either want to read more or they want to hear more about who you are and what you do. So I think a lot of times these days people have a short attention span. So I think it's important to just be kind of succinct and to the point, but try to be memorable. It's, it takes a lot of thought. You can certainly work with a coach or a mentor, to help you do that. And it takes time, and you kind of try things out too, and see what resonates with people. So if you're meeting with people in person on a regular basis, you try different things out and see how people react to Do they laugh? Do they come up to you after you do your introduction? Like, you kind of get feedback as to what's working, what helps you be unique.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Well, Alan, when you're in, let's just focus on interviewing for a second. And I think a lot of us have experienced, and our clients have experienced, those interviewers who really don't give you a chance. Either they talk throughout the interview or they don't ask any questions. What advice would you have for a candidate who finds themselves in that situation? How could they get their brand or message across?
Yeah, that certainly can be challenging. And a lot of people that do interviews are not trained to do them, so they're not great at doing it. So that part of it is being tactful, but trying to get your points across, and mention, when you're talking and when you get a chance, to answer a question, go back to them and ask a question like, would you like to hear more about that? Would you like me to clarify? If you hear something they say, oh, that reminds me of a situation I was in, and this is what the situation was, and this is how I helped resolve it. So when you're in an interview, I think the branding aspect of it isn't coming out as much by you saying it, but that certainly can come out, when they ask the tell me about yourself type of question. You can certainly use that when you're summarizing at the end of an interview, which I think is really a key thing for people to keep in mind when you come to the end of the interview. You really want to sell why you are the best candidate, and you can use that branding language in that situation as well too. So I think you can use it strategically at the beginning and the end of the interview process. And a lot of what you want to talk about when you're in the interview process itself is stories, like Charlotte was saying, and not just any story, but stories about the things that you accomplished and why they were helpful and important to the organization you were working for, to let the one that you're interviewing with now know that this is the kind of thing that I can bring to the table. So I think, you kind of weave in the branding as much as you can during the interview process. An interviewer who's not great, who doesn't let you talk a lot, it's definitely a challenge, but you have to work around it as best that you can.
Yeah, it is a tough one, and you're right. A lot of interviewers are not trained in how to interview. And I think your suggestion of that reminds me of a time is a good one. And you may have to interrupt them. You may have to say, "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that reminds me of a time," and then you go into your story. Or maybe at the end you say, "I didn't get a chance to. There was one thing I wanted to make sure you know about me." So that you have to have that coming in, right? That maybe that's your brand or whatever. But you don't want, you might think, well, they didn't give me a chance. That's their problem. But really, it's your problem, right? Because you're the one looking for the job. So you have to find a way to get your message across. Now, Charlotte, we're talking about personal brand, and we're talking about telling a story. Certainly, it's probably easy for people to visualize being in an interview and telling their story. How do you do that on a resume?
Specialization sets you apart. So when you can identify, a niche within your field that interests you, or, you have deep expertise in, those are the things that you want to share. Being intentionally specific. Don't just say I'm a marketing professional. That puts you, there's a zillion marketing professionals out there, but maybe your strength is that you're a marketing leader who specializes in scaling B2B technology companies from Series B through IPO. That puts you in a category all your own. So think about those facts you. These are the things that belong in your resume, not job duties, but telling your story. And if you have had several different, you've switched industries, or you've switched roles, or you've double switched industries and roles, that's all a part of your story. There is some kind of common thread running through all of that that makes you uniquely you. And those storytelling techniques inside of your resume are going to look a little different than they do in your LinkedIn profile, because your resume, you've got, 2 pages to get, your credentials out there, your experience. But in your LinkedIn profile, you can be more conversational and you can let people get to know you a little better. So the writing strategies behind a resume and your LinkedIn profile are really different. Don't cut and paste your resume into your experience section. You want to be able to um, let people get to know you, and let your personality through a little bit. And then the cover letter, it has 3 functions. You want to show that you understand the employer's needs. You want to tell them why you would be a good fit for that organization. And you want to ask for the interview. Those are the 3 key components. And, I see these AI generated cover letters and you can spot them a mile away. They're always 5 paragraphs. They have an opening paragraph, they have a closing, and then they've got the 3, bullet points that are lifted pretty much out of your resume. You don't want to do that. You're missing an opportunity there to connect on a human level. So your cover letter has to be showing that you took the extra step to really understand what the employer's needs are and how you would fit within that organization. That's a cover letter that connects. And I'm, also in the, this whole bottleneck situation with all the easy apply applications and recruiters getting, covered over with a tsunami of applicants. It's important to take that extra step to connect on a personal level. And if that means writing to a hiring manager and saying, I've already applied on your website, but I wanted to reach out to you personally and let you know why I'm interested in this role and how I think I'd be a good fit. Those people who take that extra step are going to be noticed. And that's how my clients are landing. They're also finding more opportunity in small to mid-sized businesses rather than, the big Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies. So my clients that have landed in the last week or 2, have looked at smaller organizations and they're quite happy there because the chain of command is shorter, the hiring cycle is shorter. So if you haven't considered that, if you've just set your sights on, Amazon or Google or, some of those big, for professional services companies, you might look at smaller companies. You might find opportunity there.
Great. Excellent advice. Thank you, Charla. Melanie, when you're helping your clients get prepare for an interview, obviously I know you're practicing interview answers with them and helping them get the words down and all those things. But what other advice or guidance do you give to your clients, whether it's from a strategic point of view or just generally to get them in the right mindset to be successful in their interviews?
So 2 things. One, this kind of goes back to the very beginning part of the conversation when Charlotte was speaking when your first question. One of the things that I've been doing in particular is asking like Claude or ChatGPT what find like are who are the people that they're interviewing with, giving the LinkedIn profile, looking through the LinkedIn profile. So I'll use my client that's interviewing with Bristol Myers Squibb. Knew that she was going to get an AI question in regards, and then based on the panel, knew specifically who that question was going to come from because he had content all about AI all over his profile. He also had taken the Bristol Myers Squibb AI certification program recently. So he was celebrating that. I knew right away that guy was going to be the AI guy. He was going to press her on her knowledge of AI, how she's using AI, things of that nature. So one of the things is like really diving deep and going to your point too. is to be able to, I call it pain points. So we knew, for example, that gentleman his pain point was your knowledge on AI. We knew that. Why is the position open? You should be asking your recruiter this. If you're in an interview position opening, why is the position open? What is this hiring manager specifically looking for? If you can start to understand the pain point of that hiring manager, you can speak to that in the interview. You don't have to call it out and go, hey, I know that you have, you lost somebody in this position. It's taken a long time to find the right person. So that's a hesitation to buy. This is all about selling. This is selling 101. And you have to be very comfortable with selling yourself in an interview, which leads me to my second point, which is simply you have to have the confidence. Even if you don't feel like you have to have the confidence, you have to show up like you can do this job. And confidence, honestly, you've ever asked yourself, how did that one person get hired with no experience? It's because they had the confidence. And that confidence is going to carry you above and beyond others that you're competing against. You can't control that. You can't control, there's a lot of things that we could add, like, hey, we need this, or I need this, I don't know this information. You can only control the things that you have control over. But how you show up, your attitude, and how you approach that interview is the game changer, regardless of how much level of experience you have.
Yeah, that is absolutely the truth, right? It's not always what you say, but how you say it that can make a big difference. So I think that's very good advice, Melanie. Thank you. So Alan, what about how do you get to that point? Like, are there any tricks you have for people? Let's face it, you get laid off, or you get fired, or whatever you want to call it. That's a blow to the ego and your confidence. How do you help people regain that?
I like to let them think about what they've done in the past. What are some of the stuff that you've accomplished? Go back to your performance appraisals. Go back to what people have said about you. Look at your LinkedIn recommendations. So, one episode doesn't define who you are. And, a lot of times in those situations, it wasn't anything that you did in particular. It was just a business decision where that happened. So, it certainly hurts, it stings, and, it's unpleasant. And, we've all on the panel gone through it, more than one time. So we understand what that's like. But you need to dwell on the positive things that have happened. You build confidence by starting to do things, in particular with the job search, looking at it as not a sprint, but as a marathon, and you chunk it down and break it up into smaller pieces and try to do things on a daily basis. Be very focused, set goals for yourself. I like to say, set them on a daily, weekly basis as to things that you want to accomplish, and celebrate those things too. It can seem insurmountable, trying to get the position, but if you break it down into smaller steps, which is what it takes to get there. So I think it takes a lot of work as far as the mindset aspect of job search. I think that's a very important piece of job search, which people don't necessarily talk about or think about as much. But I think it's also, it's important not to focus and obsess about the job search constantly. You can't be doing it 24/7. So I think you have to have other outlets where you can go, things that you like to do, that you enjoy, building in time for that. I think it's really important to have a team, or in particular, a work search buddy, if you can find somebody else who you can talk to on a regular basis, who's also maybe in transition, and you can hold each other accountable. You can, talk about what you've done and, what things worked and what things didn't, and give advice too. So I think it's important, one, not to go it alone. I think it's important to have other things to do beside the job search. And I think it's important to celebrate the smaller wins, because the smaller wins build to the bigger win, which is the ultimate thing of finding a job. So, you're going to have periods where you're down and things are not going well, or you're just not feeling good about things. So that's okay. Just try not to wallow in that or spend too much time in that phase of it, and try to move past that with all the other strategies that I talked about.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to celebrate the small wins, because the small wins add up to big wins. And also, like you said, mindset is so important, that if you just focus on, oh, I didn't get called back for this interview, oh, this person ghosted me or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of negativity. So finding those opportunities to celebrate even small successes, I think, it's part of a successful job search. So thank you for that, Alan. Let me go back to Melanie then. Melanie, so, one of the things, there's a lot of talk about LinkedIn's algorithm. Nobody really knows what it is, I guess, but there's a lot of good information out there. What's the latest and greatest? How should people be looking at LinkedIn as part of their job search strategy?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would tell you is that the LinkedIn algorithms actually, when you do it right, it's actually changed. It really actually can benefit you. The first is you have to have a firm foundation in terms of your profile. That's going to start off, that's going to kickstart everything. Then it's also looking to see who you are. This goes back to something Charlotte mentioned. Who are you interacting with? What are the types of things, what are the types of profiles you're looking at? It's becoming very intuitive. So it's basically, and it's going to start showing that. So when I'm doing a lot of my LinkedIn training, we always start with the profile. We get very specific. We're hitting, literally making sure you have like all of your skills. You can have up to 100 skills. I never tell somebody you have to have 100, but the skills are your keywords. The skills allow you to come up in searches that you might not otherwise do. Now, you do have to back these skills up with experience. You can't just list a bunch of skills, because keywords without meaning serve no point. And that goes for keywords on a resume as well. But at the same time, it's also taking it to the next step. So in order for you to be found, having a strong profile is not enough. You have to show up on the platform. You have to interact. You have to, and by interact, you do need to comment ideally, but you can engage. And if you're not seeing the right people, that tells us that you're not activated during when my partner Shell and I start to work on LinkedIn profiles, we call it activating your network. That means you need to be the one that goes out and has identified individuals in your industry, the types of people that are doing the job that you're seeking, and you need to be interacting with them. And that also includes direct messages. So it really is looking at your activity, but also who you're engaging with, the types of topics you're looking at, and that's what's going to start showing up on your feed. So if you're not seeing that, that tells us that your network is really kind of what we call dead. So we need to re-engage that network, or we're not connected with the right people. That's the other thing. You have to really, the thing on that is you have to be the one. You're never going to control if somebody responds back or any of that, but you can control what you put out there and how you approach people and how you do those things. Those are things that are in our control. And so at the end of the day, that's the only thing we have to ask ourselves. I am not an algorithm chaser. I don't live and die by the algorithm. I actually just stick with, like, here's my schedule and this is what works for me. And this is how I'm going to engage. And you know what? It actually does work. and so that's the thing that, you have to put in a little bit of effort. Your profile is only going to get you so many views. In order to really continuously grow and to be found, you need to make sure your connections are continuously growing, but you also need to make sure that you're commenting, you're feeding your profile. And by feeding your profile, that's what ultimately gets you coming up higher in searches.
Very good. Thank you, Melanie. That's good advice. And I'm going to ask you another question, and also ask you to let people know how to get in contact with you as we're getting to the top of the hour. But what's the difference between an impression, a like, and a comment on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so an impression is just a specific period of time that somebody has looked at that post. Usually it's in relation to a post. So it's just like that post was probably up on the screen for like anywhere from 30 seconds to longer. And so that's what an impression is. Don't worry about impressions. Impressions don't really, people want to chase numbers a lot of times. And the reality is, none of us really need these high level numbers, truthfully. What we need is consistent, and we need to be speaking to who our audience is. And we need to be speaking to that. I'll just use, as a job seeker, you ideally just, you're only looking for that one job per se. So you don't need, 100,000 impressions on a post. Don't get caught up in all this numbers game. That's where you start to skew yourself wrong. Then a like is simply using one of the emojis. So that is, somebody liked the post, or loved the post, or the idea, the light bulb, forget what the other ones are. Which is good. And that's also something too. Like, you can check to see if you are posting who has engaged with it. Maybe they didn't make a comment. Are you connected with that person? If so, does it make sense for you to be connected? And then a comment, of course, the engagement piece is really where engagement is gold right now on LinkedIn. Engaging is actually what's going to push you further. So you should be in the circles of, if you are if you're in the tech space and you work in a certain software platform, those are the people that you should be engaging with. And you can literally, I will say, I don't love LinkedIn's AI tools for the most part. They are pretty much behind the curve across the board. But one thing you can do in the search bar, because remember, guys, yes, this is social media. LinkedIn's just a big search engine. That's all LinkedIn is. It's just a search engine. So you can go to the top and you can put in the title of the title of the job that you're seeking with, like, in a Boolean search. And you can search by people, you can search by companies, you can search by jobs. So use all of those filters to find the people that you should be looking at. That's that's really the key.
Okay, and thank you, Melanie. And how can people get in touch with you?
Oh yeah, well, of course, on LinkedIn, that's where I do spend a bulk of my time. So you can definitely do that. And I saw Michael had a quick question. Ken, I know we're right on time, but Michael, I'll respond to you in the chat of a couple ways, and I know probably one of Charla might as well, and Alan, we can respond in the chat for you, Michael, on how to make those projects show up on your resume. But so yeah, LinkedIn is the best way. Of course, feel free to message me or just go ahead and connect with me. Especially if you do it tonight, if we're not already connected, I'll likely know that it was through Career Coaches. So that's okay if you're not able to put a note in there. That's the easiest way. But you can also check out my website at findsucceedachieve.com.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Melanie, for excellent contributions as always. And Alan, how about you? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say the best way would be through LinkedIn. It's always nice to see people that have been on the call, connect. And if you can put a note in there, that's always helpful. If you can't and you're limited, to 3 a month, then send the connection request out. And then I like to put a note back, when somebody connects, or when I send out a connection request where I can't, personalize it, to say, it was great meeting you during Career Coaches on Call and stuff. So I think it's good to have a note in there, because as your network continues to grow, you don't necessarily remember where you met everybody. So I think it's helpful to do that. So I'd say the best way would be to contact me on LinkedIn, and love to connect. And if I can help you, would like to do that as well. So thanks to my fellow coaches for another great session.
Thank you, Alan, for excellent contributions again, as always. And it was great. And Charla, how about yourself? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'd like to encourage you to follow Melanie's advice about the Boolean searches. I hope I'm pronouncing that the right way. You want to identify professionals whose career trajectories really align with your interests and learn about their career story. Ask them what it's like to work for that company. Who's your manager? Do you like working for him? You can also put the likely hiring manager's job title in a search and along with the company name. And voila, you've just turned up the likely hiring manager. So there are ways, even if it's not listed on the job posting, with a little detective work, and sometimes with a little help of AI, you can find those key players that you want to connect with. And start by, connecting with your peers, and then think about connecting with people who are maybe one or two rungs up the corporate ladder from you. And then use your combination of strategic influence, your compelling story, your deliberate networking, your building that personal brand. There's lots to do besides just searching, job boards. You want to build those relationships so those people become your advocates and talk about you when you're not in the room. So many of my clients have landed because they have built relationships with people or rekindled relationships with people that they worked with previously. Those are all great places to get your foot in the door, and makes you visible. Commenting makes you credible. So you want to build that visibility and credibility, and all those tips that Melanie gave you are just awesome. I also have a networking course that I teach. It's called the Targeted Networkers Playbook. We go into exactly what do you say when you're building those relationships? How can you find those people that you want to connect with? So if you're interested, it's a self-paced course, but we do have like weekly office hours, Q&A sessions, and there is a component of one-to-one coaching built into that program that really is helping my clients to get hired in a matter of 6 or 8 weeks. So I think you should be encouraged that the job market's picking up. And if you're interested in that, you can find out all about it on my website, writtenbyapro.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a link.
Great. Well, I would say to the audience, thank you, Charlotte, first of all, but that whether it's Charlotte or Alan or Melanie, maybe even myself, you've got some great resources here, and all of us, I think, are willing to give you 20 minutes, 30 minutes of time to talk to you and see if we can help you in any way that we can. And I am Ken Schur. I'm a career coach and an executive coach. I help people improve their professional lives. And I guess my final tip would be that, I would say, think about when you're interviewing and networking, and I think this was mentioned a couple of times, it's not just about the technical aspects of the job. It's not just about what you do. It's how you connect with people in a credible way, in a trustworthy way, in a way where they think, you know what, I can see myself working with this person for the long haul. And when you think about it, we're going to bring in 3 final candidates. Everyone meets the qualifications. They all meet the requirements. What's going to separate you? Well, certainly the stories you tell in that interview, but also it could just be the way you connect with that hiring manager. So don't discount the personal touch when you're interviewing. And with that, I do want to thank our great career coaches, Alan, Melanie, and Charlotte. I want to thank all our guests from California and Indiana and just all over the place. We're really happy you're here. We'll be back again next month, typically with a second Tuesday of every month at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll be back in May for that. And we hope you join us. Until then, everybody be well, take care, and good luck with your job search and your career development. Take care, everybody.